This show is brought to you by Levities.co, the provocative apparel company. Raw, edgy, and humorless. You don't have to agree with them. You have that right. Welcome to Mind Matters, and thank you for joining Dan Ploger and myself, John Krotek. This podcast is where we discuss the critical social, economic, and spiritual issues that affect all of us. We, the people, are in a battle against the forces of entropy, forces that are hell-bent on gaining power for personal reasons, forces hell-bent on destroying the concepts of freedom and individual thought, forces which don't benefit the social order. Thank you again. Hey, Dan, welcome back, brother, to another episode of Mind Matters. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, John. Good to be back with you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, likewise. This discussion today is it's not laughable, and excuse me if seem like I'm taking it lightly, but another week has gone by that something ridiculous has happened again in American politics. I mean, this recent exchange just happened between the WNBA star Brittany Griner and the Merchant of Death, Victor Bout. It's left me speechless. I mean, there's some great questions we can talk about, or some great things that we can ponder, like the value of life and who gets swapped and who doesn't get swapped and who makes those decisions. And is it a wise one or not? But I have to say that it's another embarrassing moment, I believe, for America, to put this guy back out into the world population who knows how many lives he's responsible for killing, often playing both sides of the aisle, or both countries involved in the skirmishes. He was trading missiles and weaponry and all kinds of things, and involved in civil wars all around the globe before he was finally caught by Interpol and the Thai police and American intelligence in Thailand in 2008, came back to the States, was sentenced to 25 years for the crimes that he was accused of. And then that's one side. And then Brittany Griner, who is a celebrity, if you will, played for Baylor University, a basketball star, decides she's going to go to play in the league in Russia. And as she's leaving, she's caught with a vape pen in her baggage. And of course, the Russians are famous for long, drawn-out political exposés, and she gets sentenced to 9 years in jail. And it looks like Brittany's going to be gone for a while. And then out of the blue comes this trade. And here we are. Brittany's back in the States. God bless her. We're glad she's back. We love our Americans. As Michael Whelan, a guy who many believe was falsely accused of espionage, still sits in a Russian jail.
Is he a Marine officer?
Ex-Marine, and I understand he was. I don't know if he was an officer or not, but I understand that he was left the Marine Corps on a dishonorable discharge. Not sure, but that he was accused of larceny. Could be Russian propaganda. Who knows? But regardless, he did serve the country, and he's still in Russia. And we've got who Joe Biden says is the greatest example of an American right here over my shoulder, Brittany. I'm not passing judgment, but there's something not right with this. So let me ask you, Dan, what about Bout, Victor Bout? Give me some thoughts on that.
Well, he's a famous, world famous capitalist. And it appears we exchanged a capitalist for a socialist. with Griner. If our actions reveal our values, this is a sad statement. But of course, I have no respect for Griner whatsoever as she protests being an American and protests the idea of the national anthem at WNBA games. I have no respect for the woman. And she doesn't, by not playing the national anthem, by protesting that, she's not protesting slavery or these types of issues. She's protesting the country from which she originates. And why wouldn't you be proud of your nation, even though the nation wasn't particularly responsive to your particular political needs? The country is what you imagine it. And I don't know what her social or financial gains have been through the WNBA and her experience at Baylor, but I'm certainly I suspect she's a capitalist at heart as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because most athletes that get to that level of stardom, and even in I roommated when I went to school. I roommated with a football player who played at the college I was at, and they were wined and dined and treated like royalty. So I would imagine that because of her talents on the basketball court, that she was probably lifted up, treated like royalty at Baylor University because, she can play basketball for sure, but there's something not quite right. That hypocrisy, it reeks of hypocrisy. It reeks of just being wrong. But then again, that's a judgment call.
Well, yes, these athletes are treated with with preference. I had the opportunity to at least play freshman football at Michigan State when I was young, and I was able to see how the football players were treated. They didn't get normal dorm food. They had steak and they lived in their own dormitory in their own world, which started their, I guess, segregating them from society and thinking they're something very special. Well, they are special while they're young and fit, but she's got to look beyond her future as an athlete as well. I'm glad that she was released. She shouldn't have been there in the first place. Nobody should be jailing anybody for possession of marijuana, but nonetheless, she's in a foreign country, and if she were a critical thinker, she would have recognized the dangers and added exposure she has as a celebrity and as an athlete and as potential political fodder. So now that's what she's accomplished. She is a famous political fod.
Yeah, that raises a good point, about critical thinking and the bubble that celebrities and athletes live in. Many call them at this level elitist. And so if you're living in a bubble and you think the world just is at your command and, people kiss the ground you walk on, it's a bubble. And I can tell you this, I'm not an athlete, but I'm fairly reasonable and I do understand logic. There's no way that I would travel to Russia, not with their track history of perverse political courts and just the way they treat their people. It's a government run by thugs. If we want to be blatantly honest here, and it's tyranny, it's authoritarianism, it's totalitarianism. You don't stand a chance there. If they want you, they're going to get you. And so, whoever instructed or promoted her traveling to Russia in the first place, they have to check their critical thinking cap at the door too. Wouldn't you think?
Well, critical thinking is always a good idea, John. That's how you determine what is misinformation and disinformation. we're bombarded with this concept of misinformation, but yet we don't train our people or to recognize this. And to one of the critical elements of critical thinking is to consider the source and to evaluate whether the arguments that we're debating even make logical sense. She is a woman of privilege. She has wealth, she has fame, and she uses that as a weapon against the people that made her what she is. It's
Yeah,
sad.
yeah, it is sad. Then you take Victor Bout, and there was a quote that I saw on one of the news services in an interview that he did in 2012, and they were interviewing about what he thought about being in prison. And he said, I'm still a young man. He said, but your empire is going to fail, and I will make it back to Russia. So, somewhat prophetic, there's a lot of people right now that feel that America is under attack in our education system, in our government, our judicial system, our law enforcement agencies, not only at local levels, but this defund the police and Black Lives Matters and all these things that are really meant to divide a wedge between the people. He's just maybe that's a prophecy. Maybe the empire is failing. Maybe we are on the verge of the end of the American dream and what the forefathers envisioned, because stuff like this is anything but common sense. And of course, we're simplifying it. It's a very complex issue. But what's going on with this American leadership? And I don't mean just one party. I think that there's a lot of establishment miscues going on. It feels almost like there's something else going on here.
Yeah, the consternation that we feel from again our actions reflect our values. It's scary that we would put somebody that we would even consider allowing somebody like this to be free again in his world in definition of freedom. But it's a sad commentary, I think, on the value we place as on him as an enemy versus her as I don't know, as somebody who's on our side. I don't know. But the United States empire, the beauty of it is it's always been on the verge of collapse. And anytime you give the population as much freedom as the United States grants their citizens, you're always on the verge of collapse. And we've been on the verge of collapse since 1776. So I'm not worried about the country. I think that I've got a good feel for what the average American citizen believes in, and it's not what these two represent in any sense.
That's a great point. I know that there's a quote by Benjamin Franklin when they signed the Declaration of Independence, when those, early patriots and people with a vision, they were celebrating out in the street, and Ben Franklin was asked about it, and he was happy, and he was quoted like, "It's a republic if we can keep it." And so, what you said just does have a lot of merit. I think in modern times, we probably haven't seen the prosperity like we've seen. And so we can get complacent. We can, these tools that are used to dismantle institutions creep into those institutions. We sit fat and pretty, many of us, and take things for granted. So I think this is just another example of how important, it's kind of ironic that she doesn't want to stand for the national anthem, or doesn't want it to be played, in fact, but yet she's on a plane. I think she's home already, but she's on a plane back to the country that gave her that right to protest. Try doing
Well,
that in Russia. Try not standing for the Russian anthem as a
right.
Russian player. See what happens to you or your family.
Yeah. And what a narcissistic attitude that the national anthem is being played for her benefit. I mean,
Un- Unbelievable. I mean,
it
it's just,
has nothing to do with her. She happens to be an actor that is paid to perform a game. And remember, it's a game. There's no consequence one way or the other than other than the commercial consequences. And put yourself in your place, understand where you stand. You don't stand anywhere. I don't care whether you want the national anthem played or not. I want it played. So
and we're
this
paying to watch it. We're
versus
paying
us.
to, yeah, and we're paying to watch you play. You know,
Yes,
it's shades of Colin Kaepernick all over again. You know, when
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
when they when he,
This victimhood uh, badge of victimhood. There ought to be a medal that goes along with the Purple Heart that we can give to victims, and they can wear it. And there would be degrees of victimhood. There would be simple victimhood.
we could give
Where,
him a battle star for those, you know, or an oak leaf cluster.
yeah, exactly. Stripes or something. How many times you've been victimized, and then we could display it on our sleeves and on our epaulets so that the world could see. I think that would be a good idea, and I would give her 1 star for this one.
Could you imagine? It would be a campaign, right? Could you
Right.
imagine the victimhood army? That's a great idea, Dan. And then
How
we could
about,
see,
how about the victimhood awards where we'll have every year, we'll have all the victims stand up and vote for which is the greatest victim of all of them. And every year honor these victims in a big ceremony and a statue of some kind.
yeah, I think I'd have to give Megan, Prince Harry, you know, a couple of oak leaf clusters, maybe even a Congressional Medal of Honor. You ought to go to Colin Kaepernick for being GQ's Man of the Year. You know, that's a grand idea. The Victimhood Awards and Hollywood, who's so perfect at it, they could be the ones that they could go right next to the Academy Awards. They could make like a dual award ceremony. That would be awesome.
That's a terrific idea.
And we could even invite Bout back and have him be the keynote speaker.
Oh, he was certainly a victim. Here he is, just a capitalist, just exercising his right to trade goods for a profit. And son of a gun, he ends up in jail.
That deserves a Legion of Merit. You know, all kidding aside, you know, this is serious business. They're complex issues. And like we said earlier, you know, it's great that she's back and that she's safe and that she's with her friends and family. But, you know, Mike Whalen's friends and family are still here, empty handed. There's no Mike Whalen, you know, back home who, you know, I don't think he's playing the victim. I think that he earned his stripes in a different way. And who knows when he'll be back. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know what the situation is other than what the very brief press accounts. And of course, my critical thinking forces me to discount a lot of what I've heard on this subject. But is certainly if there's any doubt that he was a spy, then certainly we need to consider maybe at least bringing him to home and where he can face his accusers in the court. So if he's a spy, that's bad. If he's not a spy, it's horrendous. So I would think certainly if I had to weigh one against the other, I would certainly pick him over a basketball player, an actor.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. And again, um, lots of things to ponder. You know, we asked listeners, and thank you for listening. You know, ask yourself, what about Bout? You know, what does it mean to you? You know, use your own critical thinking skills and use some logic and reason and try to determine for yourself, not what Dan just said, the misinformation and propaganda that tries to sway you one way or another. We're just two guys talking about it, you know, and we thank God and we thank all of those who have risked their lives over the years to allow people in America to have freedom of speech, and I'm glad we can exercise it like this, Dan.
Right on.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Mind Matters. Use your critical thinking. Use logic and reason. Make your own determinations on the critical issues. Stay alert. Stay alive. This show is brought to you by Levities.co, the provocative apparel company. Raw, edgy, and humorless. You don't have to agree with them. You have that right.